Thank you very much to Father Cannoli, and thank you very much to the Villanova Art Gallery to have given me this honor of to talk about one of the main passions of my life. Passion has been my passion for at least 30 years, and I'm sure it will be my passion for the rest of my life, and it is the Shroud of Turin. I would like to thank also Mary Beth Avioli, that was the work here at Villanova. She was instrumental in introducing me to Father Cannoli, and of course I would like to, I'm honored to have here also my sister-in-law Maria O'Brien, that works at the Mathematical Sciences departments only for a few more months. And thank you all the friends that have come here, those that have already watched other presentations. This is improved. I hope so. There are two videos that I hope we will be able to show. I would like to thank also two people that are not present. My father-in-law Albert Primavera, that took some pictures, and my friend Giorgio Bracaglia of the Holy Shroud Guild, that helped me in particular with one slide that I'll mention at the end. Last but not least, although she asked me not to do it, but I'm here on stage and now I'm the one who calls the shots. I want to thank my wife and love of my life, Carol, that is my best friend and my constant support, and she's trying to very herself. Without her, probably I would not have been able to put up all this presentation. She's much more technologically savvy than I am. That's okay. Anyway, before we get into the presentation, I would like to just to give you a quick overview. To be more or less an hour and a half, give or take, and maybe a few minutes more, but and then there will be time for questions and answers. And of course, as you can see, the theme, that you know, that's the Turin Shroud, the silent witness of the Passion, Death, Resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. When we face we deal with the Shroud, we usually there are two issues that we are faced with. Although in the mind of many people, these two issues are not separated but are united. The first issue is the Shroud authentic, or is it a forgery? Especially in light of the Carbon 14 test of 1988, they claimed it was a medieval forgery between 1260 and 1390. And in case it is authentic, was the man that was wrapped in the shroud Jesus of Nazareth? I'll follow a few steps to the presentation. For those that are not very familiar with the shroud, I'll mention what the shroud is first, so we get acquainted with it. And then I'll talk about the documented history of the shroud since the 14th century. Then I'll mention what the shroud is not. Then I'll mention the Carbon 14 test. And then, in consideration of the fact that I've been invited by Father Cannoli, who is an artist, and by the Villanova Art Gallery, I'll talk about the elements in favor of the authenticity of the shroud, especially in relation to Christian art. And finally, I'll talk about how the shroud, the conformity of the shroud with the Passion, Death, and Resurrection of Christ according to the Gospels. A few clarifications. I think it's honest to say on my part that I personally have the most absolute certainty that the Shroud of Turin was the burial cloth of Christ. But since I don't want to impose my opinion on you, I'll mention as much as I can during the whole presentation the person who was wrapped in it as the man of the shroud. So I'll give you all plenty of information. I'll let you make an informed decision at the end. Of course, I'll clarify when there are theories that I'm not a little bit the different level of certainty of certain theories. Say when they are absolutely certain, very highly probable, medium probability, low probability. And also the last category, when there is no way that a theory is possible, that is a category that in the English used in the United States has a specific scientific term. It's called bunch of baloney. Anyway, I'll work practically like a district attorney, trying to present a case of a murder, an actual murder accomplished 2,000 years ago, a murder of an innocent victim, a murder for which there is a witness, and so I'll try to convince the jury, that you, beyond any reasonable doubt, that my case. And of course, with seems a difficult issue, but with the help of God, I hope to be able to do it. And at this point, let's get into the recorded presentation. So you already know the title. Okay. So now sorry. Okay. Okay. So that is the Resurrection of Christ by Rubens. That is Palazzo Pitti in Florence. As you can see, there is Christ trying to get seated from the moment of resurrection, seated from the bench, the stone bench on which he had been laid to rest. And in trying to sit up, of course, he's lifting with his body also the shroud that you see behind him. Actually, in reality, things went a little bit differently. We'll see later. But anyway, so that is the shroud. You can either look at the top or look at my replica at the bottom. The shroud is a linen cloth that is 14 feet and 3 inches long, and it is 3 feet and 7 inches wide or high if it is exposed this way vertically. On the shroud, there are 4 different kinds of marks that are visible. I use the drawing. There is the frontal and dorsal body image of a man that looks to have undergone a scourging, a crowning with thorns, and a crucifixion. There are the blue marks are water stains. The red marks are blood stains, and then there are better visible on the replica at the bottom. There are 2 parallel marks of scorches that were formed when the shroud underwent a fire when it was in Chambéry, France. Anyway, we shall examine all those aspects. Of course, it's called the Shroud of Turin because it's preserved in Turin since 1578. That is the town of Turin. On the back, in the back on the background, you see the Alps. By the way, since the Olympic Games just ended in Pyeongchang, Turin was also the seat of the Winter Olympics in 2006. Okay, so the first mark that I mentioned, the frontal and dorsal body image of a tortured, scourged, crowned with thorns and crucified man. One thing that is important I think is important to mention that since the 1300s, it is tradition, every time that the shroud is exposed, when you see paintings or etchings or engravings on the shroud is always exposed with the frontal bodily image on the left-hand side from the point of view of the observer, and the dorsal bodily image on the right-hand side. As I said, there are those in blue are water stains. There in my replica, those that looks like Los Angeles. There. In the past, I said some people still say that there were the water stains left by the water used to extinguish the fire of Chambéry in 1532, but actually it's not the case. Those water marks were left on another occasion. It's not known when, but my friend Aldo Guereschi, the Turin photographer from whom I purchased the life-size replicas, he presented a study where, in order to have those water marks there, the shroud was folded, as you can see up there, first in two, this way, then was folded again to form 4 layers, but then at that point the shroud was folded to form like an accordion, like you see there. And then one corner was then stained with water, but then once unfolded, it showed all along the. That is this is a speculation. We don't know exactly when or where it was preserved when it got stained, but that is a terracotta jar like the ones that in which were found the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they have used this. So the shroud was inside, folded an accordion, and got stained there, and then once unfolded, it manifests all those marks all along. This is a magnification of the shroud, and this is also one of the main fingerprints of the shroud. The shroud is a linen cloth, but it is woven with this very specific herringbone pattern. You see there's this zigzag pattern, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. The shroud is the only ancient, there is only another one in the Middle Ages, linen cloth woven that way. There are other cloths like these ones, these leggings or this other textile from Egypt, but they are made of wool. So the shroud is the only textile woven with that herringbone pattern from ancient times. It's the only one, but it's from the Middle Ages. I don't remember what it is preserved, but it's very specific characteristic of the shroud. This is a further magnification, and you see there the two of those straps of the herringbone weaving. Each of those straps has the width of 11 millimeters. Consider that an inch is 25 millimeters, so each the strap is about less than half an inch, and runs all along the shroud. That is a further magnification, and now we see an even greater magnification. There you see, so that is a thread of linen of the shroud, but if you notice that every thread of linen is made of between 70 to 120 fibers. They have the size more or less of a human hair. You see there all those fibers there, and that is an area where of the shroud where there is the body image. As you can see, you see that there the fibers look to be kind of brownish, beige. So practically, already from here, you can see that there are no pigments, no dyes, no paints. So this already picture should make people understand that the shroud is not a painting. The other thing that is important to say is that the coloration of the fiber, that actually technically is a dehydrating oxidation of the fibers, is extremely superficial. I'll show the next slide. That is a section of one thread. and those are all the circle are all the fibers. Okay. Today it's not a good day. Actually, maybe I'm starting. Those are the fibers. So the coloration involves only the most superficial fibers of each thread. So practically, if you had the chance to look at the back of the shroud, although since 1570 there is a backing cloth, so you wouldn't see this aspect. If you had the chance to remove the backing cloth, you'll see that all those other marks, the blood stains, the water marks, the scorches, go through the cloth, so are visible on the other side. The body image is not. It's visible only on the front side. This is a painting by Giovan Battista della Rovere, preserved at Galleria Sabata in Turin, where it shows how the band of the shroud was wrapped in the shroud. I have a statue, in case we're not that easily. So this is the man of the shroud, how it was laid at rest, to rest in the shroud. So the body was placed on half of the shroud, and the other half was placed over the front of the body. So that the back imprinted half of the shroud, the upper part imprinted the frontal part of the body imprinted the other half of the shroud. Not that in order to create confusion, but the shroud, if you look at that image, you would think that that is the right arm, that is the left leg, and vice versa, left arm, left leg. Actually, the shroud is a mirror image of the body that imprinted it. So whatever part of the body you see on the shroud was actually left from the opposite part of the body of the man of the shroud. So the right arm and right leg imprinted the left arm and left leg of the image, and vice versa. To make it a little bit more clear, if I put paint on my hand and then apply my hand on the shroud, and I remove my hand, it would get imprinted, but then what was imprinted in my right hand would look like a left hand. So in order to make you understand this mirror image. Sorry. Okay, now we get into the documented history of the shroud. The shroud is documented in history starting in the 1300s, actually in the 1350s, around 1355, as a possession, or at least in the custody of a French knight by the name of Shroud de Charny. That gentleman there, you see that was his coat of arms, three white shields in a red field. Geoffroy de Charny was the road of the village of Liray in France. Geoffroy de Charny died at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356 without leaving no written document about how he got in possession of the shroud. So now there are a lot of research, but so far has not been exactly very clearly specified how he got in possession of the shroud. This is a medallion, a fragment of a pilgrim medallion. You know, when you go sometimes to places, you get a metal bottom to place on either on your head or your t-shirt, whatever. That was a pilgrim medallion. If you look there, you see on the left-hand side the frontal body image. On the right-hand side, the dorsal body image. You see the zigzag pattern, very typical of the shroud. On the left-hand side, you see the coat of arms of Geoffroy de Charny. On the right-hand side, you see the coat of arms of Jeanne de Vergy, his second wife. This medallion is preserved in Paris at the Museum of the Middle Ages Museum, and was rescued from the River Seine. from the Seine. So probably a pilgrim went to see an exhibition of the Shroud and then came back to Paris and then somehow lost it in the river. The medallion is fragmented, is broken. What looks those two triangles with vertical lines actually were two priests or two clergy that were holding the Shroud. There are later engravings or etchings where you see when there were expositions of the Shroud, there were also always bishops. Here there are too many. I could imagine all those bishops fitting in. There are a little bit less, but they were holding always the Shroud that way, as you can see. Until the late 1800s, when they started to frame it, when they exposed. So, but otherwise, this is a tombstone of the son of Geoffroy I of Charny, Geoffroy II of Charny. And then in 1453, Margaret de Charny, the granddaughter of Geoffroy de Charny, she was in financial difficulties, so she transferred the ownership of the Shroud to that gentleman, Louis of Savoy, of the Dukes of Savoy, that later became the royal family of Italy. Luke of Savoy, the Lodovico is the Italian name. I think it is Louis of Savoy. He placed in the Sainte Chapelle of Chambéry. Chambéry was the capital of the Savoy Kingdom. It was in the Sainte Chapelle of Chambéry that in 1532 the Shroud underwent a devastating fire. It was preserved in that niche behind the main altar, as you can see. That is an enlargement of the niche. And okay, luckily I need to improve this slide. That is not the reliquary where it was preserved in Chambéry. That was a reliquary was used to transfer the Shroud from Chambéry to Turin. But the Shroud was folded to form practically, as it shows it, 48 layers. That is a magnification of an area of the burns. And so when the Shroud got unfolded, all those scorches. Sorry, I forgot one. There was one fragment of the reliquary. Still, there are some people I heard in lectures. Some people still say, or also in some documentaries, that you see a drop of melted metal that fell on one of the corners. It's not the case. As you can see, from my replica, from the shot at the bottom, the scorches were triangular. Melted metal would have formed round holes, not triangular holes. Still my friend Aldo Gureschi, from whom I purchased the Shroud, he presented a work where, besides showing that the Shroud was folded like an accordion, when there was a fire at Chambéry, actually an incandescent piece of metal from the reliquary fell onto one corner of the Shroud and went through it. But then again, when the Shroud got unfolded, all those holes got replicated practically along two lines. The practical line, the front of the dorsal body image. This took place in 1532. In 1534, the Clare nuns of Chambéry applied patches to cover the holes, and then they stitched on the back a backing cloth to strengthen, reinforce the Shroud to prevent from further damage. There is the Shroud again. There is a copy of the Shroud allegedly made by Albrecht Dürer, the famous German painter and engraver. That is preserved in the church of Saint-Gomer in Liers, in Belgium. It is dated, as you can see there, is 1516. So that copy was made before the fire of Chambéry of 1532. Of course, you don't see the double line of scorches as after the 1532 fire. But you see those 4 sets of marks there? They are better visible there. They are all circle. That is one of those 4 sets. Those are 4 burns, 4 holes that were definitely caused by some incandescent object. It's not known neither when it happened nor when it happened. Sorry, but I heard some lecturers saying that damage was caused by someone that was trying to use incense around the shroud that accidentally dropped incense. And makes me cringe. If you want to ask me know why, you ask me later. Keep in mind these 4 sets of hobbies, we'll find them again later. It's very interesting. So the only one thing that we can know for sure that at the time when those 4 sets of L-shaped holes were made, the shroud were folded to make 4 layers. First folded in 2, and then folded again 2 to make 4 layers. That's the only thing. In 1578, St. Charles Borromeo, the man there in red, and there also in red, who was the Bishop of Milan, had made a vow that if the plague that afflicted Milan stopped, he would go to Chambéry on foot to pay homage to the shroud. The plague stopped, and St. Charles Borromeo decided was going to fulfill his pledge, and Emmanuel Philibert of Savoy, the Duke of Savoy at the time, in order to shorten the pilgrimage of St. Charles Borromeo, transferred the shroud from Chambéry to Turin, and then has remained there since 1578. This is why I said that reliquary we saw earlier, that was the reliquary was used to transfer the shroud from Chambéry to Turin. So once reached Turin, was placed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, but then in the 1600s, that chapel in the back was built to preserve specifically the shroud. It was built specifically to preserve the shroud. The shroud was placed there in 1694. The chapel was designed by the architect Guarino Guarini. That was the inside of the chapel. The art by Bertola. The chapel was preserved behind there. There were three grates with 3 different locks. So in case someone had the idea of trying to steal, it would not have been that easy. Now we get into the modern age of the shroud. That is Secondo Pia, a lawyer by profession, but an amateur photographer as a hobby, who was allowed to, was granted the chance to take pictures of the shroud. And he found out that practically, that effect there, that the shroud actually behaves, and let me say behaves, not that some people say behaves, if you want to know why, ask me later the question, like a photographic negative. So like in mathematics, when you do the negative of the negative, you get a positive. When you go to make take a picture of the shroud of that one, my replica just below the screen, and you make the negative of the picture, before you get the other replica, that one. Sorry. Okay, here I have it one by the other. There was a huge commotion of the people raised up in arms. This is a hoax, it's a scandal, blah blah blah. But then in 1931, Giuseppe Enrier, this time a professional photographer, took a second series of pictures, and he confirmed that Secondo Pia was not a forger, was not clearly a hoax. The shroud actually behaves like a photographic negative. One more element to, not because I like not to create confusion, but that is a picture of the pose of the face. So you see there is that rivulet of blood that looks like a reverse 3. When you look at the negatives of the face or the body, especially on the face, you look at the 3, it looks normal. Starting with Secondo Pia, since the negative inverts the light and shades, but since it's much more detailed than the real image, in order to make the picture look exactly as though you had that person, the man of Shroud, in front of you, he reversed also the specular, the mirror image. So in that case, you have, when you look at the negative, usually, especially if the tree is normal, it's in order to make exactly see how the person was, as you had taken exactly a picture of the person. The Shroud was in Turin, as I said, has been in Turin since 1578 with 2 exceptions. 1706, the Turin was besieged by the French troops, and the Shroud was taken for a few months to Genoa, and finally, during the Second World War, was taken to the monastery of Monte Vergine in the south of Italy, is not too far from Naples, in the province of Avellino. And then in the 1970s, we get into the scientific era of the Shroud. NASA had developed a device that was called a VP8 image analyzer that was used to analyze pictures sent from the probes, especially the ones for the Viking program, to analyze the pictures. If you put the image of a human being under the VP8 image analyzer, it deforms it completely. If you put the picture of the Shroud under the VP8 image analyzer, you get that image. Now, let's cross fingers. I have a video to show that. I hope. Come on. No. Okay, so. I'm sorry, yeah, the technical assistance. Apologize.
Extraordinary photograph of myself in mess dress, one which I'm sure my mother would be very proud of. And I'm going to put this under the camera. And John is adjusting the gain in exactly the same way as he did with the squares. I'm sure you'll agree that even my mother would have trouble recognizing me there. Now the reason for this is very simple. A normal photograph records only variations in light and does not record information about the distance the camera was from the subject. Now we'll put a picture of the Shroud under the camera.
I often cried when I look at that video.
As you can see, unlike the photograph of Eric, this image is clearly recognizable. This can only be explained if the intensity levels of the Shroud image itself are encoded with distance information from the cloth to the body. There are 2 interesting features which are revealed by this 3-dimensional display. Firstly, there appears to be some kind of object which prevented an image from being formed. Note the depression around the face and the way the hair seems to drape over it. Even the beard appears to be divided by it. Perhaps this is the chin bandage.
And St. John also speaks of a napkin or at his head, or earlier described as round the face of Lazarus. And I think that it's clearly functional. It was, as I understand it, a piece of cloth rather like this, which was then.
I apologize. 2 hours too short, 1 minute of okay. So those are the other. Okay. Those other images of taken from the BPA image analyzer. I'll re-clarify because probably it was not too clear when John Jackson said that practically in the body image of the shroud there is encoded three-dimensional information. That means where the shroud was more in contact with the body, like for example the tip of the nose, there were more fibers, the fibers that I show you, the color fibers per square millimeter, per square whatever, unit of area. Other areas where, for example, over the eye sockets, where there was no contact because the eye sockets are concave, there were less colored fibers. So the more intense the image is, the more that means that the more the cloth was in contact with the body. So this shows that inside the shroud there was a human, there was a body. Human, very likely, but there was definitely a body. That was not just a painting. That is the exhibition 1978 to show you how the crowd of people that the huge amount of people. And then in 1978, after the exhibition, a group of scientists from the United States, led by John Jackson, who was one of the two gentlemen that in the video, were allowed to examine the shroud for 120 hours, 5 days in a row, non-stop, around the clock. I don't know how they did it. I heard John Jackson that they were sleeping 2-3 hours per night, but how they were able to do the experiments. But as long as the experiments were not invasive, they couldn't cut or. That is the list of the scientists. And after 3 years, in 1981, they showed their conclusions. That was, we can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and also test positive for psyllium albumin. The image is in ongoing mystery, and until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists or perhaps by some scientists in the future, the problem remains unsolved. I would say that it's still unsolved. Anyway, then in 1983, Humbert II of Savoy, the gentleman there, the last king of Italy, the fourth king of Italy, of the Savoy family, he died and he left in his will the shroud to the church. So the shroud practically changed owner, didn't change the location, remained in Turin, but the owner was no more, the Savoy family was the church. 1988, the very controversial Carbon-Fontaine test, as you can see there, they claim the shroud to be a medieval forgery between 1260 and 1390. And then in 1997, the night between the 11th and 12th of April, another devastating fire that practically almost completely destroyed the Guarini Chapel, where the shroud was preserved. Thank God, the shroud had been moved 4 years earlier in the cathedral just behind the main altar. So those were behind that door there would be the Guarini Chapel. Had the shroud been still be kept inside the Guarini Chapel, we would have no more shroud nowadays. The fireman, that is Mario Trematore, with a sledgehammer broke that bulletproof glass and were able to bring the shroud to safety. And so until then it was preserved in that kind of reliquary, in a long reliquary rolled around a wooden roll. But then in 2000 a very high-tech case was prepared where the shroud now is preserved now. So the shroud there is kept completely extended, so flat and completely extended, so no rolling. and it's bulletproof, and air is pumped out, argon gas is pumped in, and is kept under constantly monitored conditions of humidity, temperature, and light. Actually, no light, because ask me later, I don't want to get into details. And then in 2002, another very controversial intervention. There was a restoration intervention that practically the patches that had been applied by the clairvoyants of Chambéry in 1532 were removed, and the backing cloth that had been stitched to the back also was removed and replaced with another backing cloth. The purpose? Very dubious. So now the shroud, you see for example, the frontal body image before the 2002, after 2002. My replica, that is with the patches, that is the negative of the shroud after the removal of the patches. So you see that there are no patches there. But I have also a replica, a pose, and couldn't display to all of them. This is one of the expositions, and then the shroud has been visited by very important visitors. John Paul II in 1998, Benedict XVI in 2010, and Francis in 2015. So now it's so in that chapel, those are behind the curtain. When the curtains are open, it's under that kind of cloth. Under the cloth there is the high-tech case. So now we go to the carbon 14 test. One thing that, as I said, was very controversial. One thing that I can say, I don't want to criticize the technique of the carbon 14 test, but I can say that there were, first of all, there were several, at least 5 protocols that had been decided during 2 years of meetings between the representatives of the church and representatives of different laboratories. They were all completely disrespected. To give you an idea, it has been decided that they would take samples from different areas of the shroud. Finally, they took a sample only from one corner. So, first protocol completely disrespected. It was decided that there had to be a simultaneous, comprehensive examination, including the STURP, the scientists that examined in 1978. The laboratory, the carbon 14 laboratories wanted the spotlight only for them. They pressed until they were able to get the STURP, the scientific STURP, out of the picture. The 7 carbon 14 tests had to participate, were reduced to 3. It had to be performed a blind test. That means they had to find other textiles similar to the shroud, so that technically the scientists would not be able to know what they were examining. But since the shroud, as I showed earlier, has that very unique characteristic of the head, that it's a linen with a heading board, they couldn't find any other textiles with those characteristics, so the shroud was extremely easily identifiable. And finally, there was an agreement that the labs had not to confer with each other, but since all the other protocols were not respected, that practically was disrespected by default. There was no more possibility to enforce them. But anyway, to give you an idea, the scientists of the STURP would have been the scientists who knew the best where to take the sample. They arrived the day of the test, the carbon 14 test. They spent 2 hours that morning to try to decide where to take the sample, and they took the sample from the worst possible area of the shroud. That is Giovanni Rigi di Numana, the Italian who actually physically performed the cut. You see, he's cutting the sample. That is Franco Testore, an Italian textile expert that is weighing the sample. Already weighing the sample, it was noticed that the weight of the sample was almost twice the average weight of the shroud related to that small, what should have been compared to the average weight of the shroud. They should already have raised a flag, but no problem. They went on. So that is the area of where the sample was taken. If you notice, that is the shroud, that part there. That part below there, that is the backing cloth. But if you notice, there is one section that is just below where the sample had been taken, that is lighter than the other area, just the adjacent area. That is both the backing cloth. So why one is darker and then the other is lighter? So this shows where the sample was taken. It was taken from that corner, and you see there is a further indentation there compared to the upper picture. That is where the sample was taken. Now, if you look at engravings or etchings or paintings about exposition of the shroud, there is always a bishop that is holding that corner with one hand, and this has gone on for centuries. I spoke with John Jackson, that was the leader of the stir, but I asked him, do you think that would have skewed the technical of the test for so many, almost 12, 13 centuries? And no, I don't think so. But anyway, in 2000, two researchers, Joe Marino and Sue Benford, a husband and wife, presented a paper at the Orvieto Shroud Conference, where they theorized that in that area where the sample had been taken, there was foreign material. That means it has been performed a so-called French reweaving or invisible mending, a technique in which textile tailors in the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance, were experts. It's not visible with with the naked eye. So probably that corner where so probably they had cut, the Savoy had removed some piece to give to some royal friends, blah, 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 and that had started to unravel. So they performed this invisible mending or reweaving, but that doesn't mean they patched that area this way. They performed it this way. So they wove cotton into the linen. This is where you saw that area of the backing cloth that was darker, because cotton can be dyed better than linen. Once they rewove the cotton into the linen, then they dyed the cotton. And that, of course, dyed also the backing cloth that was part of the shroud that was missing. That is Ray Rogers, a member of the STURP, that when he heard this theory of Marino and Benford, got furious. He called them fringe lunatics. But then Barry Schwartz, the documenting photographer of the STURP, told him, well, prove them wrong. He took some samples from the shroud, from that area, examined them, called back Barry Schwartz and said, you know what, they were right. Actually, he found that there was cotton, there were traces of a mordant, and there were traces of a dye. So that area had been rewoven with cotton, dyed, and so anyway, this is Giulio Fanti, a friend of mine, who in 2013 performed 3 tests on material from the shroud. What is funny, Carol told me, read it slowly. And even if I read it slowly, I don't know what you can understand better. That a Fourier transformed infrared spectroscopy, a Raman spectroscopy, and a mechanical multiparametric analysis. And practically the results were that for the Fourier spectroscopy, that for the Raman spectroscopy, that for the multiparametric. You see at the bottom you see that is 1AD, from going to the right is AD, going to the left is BC. The 3 tests practically overlap on that column that correspond to the 1st century AD. So, okay, now we get into what the shroud is not. The shroud is not, we said, is not a painting. There are not enough color, there are not enough pigments, we already saw and mentioned. The edges of the image of the body image are extremely blurred. They are not defined. They are not actually. If you get closer to the shot, closer than 10 feet, the image starts to disappear. So an eventual forger, an eventual painter would have needed a brush that was longer than 10 feet. The image has no pictorial style. Probably Father Canuri can confirm that an expert, an artist like Father Canuri, if you did show him some paintings, he would identify more or less the time, more or less the geographic area where it was painted. This is not the case of the Shroud. The copies of the Shroud made by artists during the centuries are always extremely, the quality extremely poor. And finally, why would they have the forger? A forger would have tried to imitate the original as much as possible. Why the forger used all characteristics like the nails in the wrist instead of the palms of the hands? Why a couple of thorns instead of a circlet? Or other, so they're very unusual in the Christian iconography, were almost unknown. And finally, that is a picture taken by the Sturp in 1978 of the Shroud in transmitted light. That means that this is the Shroud, instead of the light being illuminating the Shroud from the front, it was illuminating the Shroud from the back. So with the light from the back, you still see the blood stains there, for example. You still see the watermarks, like that one, for example. That is not blood stain. You see the scorch marks. You don't see the body image anymore. So this shows that if it was a painting and there was paint, you would have seen it. In transmitted light, you don't see anymore the body image. That means there is no paint again. Further proof that there are. And the other, the other thing that Shroud is not is some people claim that some deniers that the Shroud was placed, a cloth that was placed on a very long bas-relief. A bas-relief is a sculpture that is not a fully round statue. It's just a relief over a surface or a marble or a bronze. And the problem is that number one, between 1260 and 39, it would have been extremely difficult to uniformly keep such a long bas-relief. The problem would have also been to transfer the curved surface of the bas-relief onto the flat surface of the Shroud. The same problem that cartographers had when they tried to transfer the curved surface of the Earth onto a bidimensional surface on a map. The image would be distorted. So if really had been obtained on a bas-relief, we would have that image there. Because the cloud the face, but then once when it was going to be unfolded, it would be much more extended. Plus the scorches on the Shroud, those double wire scorches, they fluoresce under ultraviolet fluorescent light. The body image doesn't fluoresce. And finally, the blood stains were formed before the body image. Under the blood stain, there is no body image. So the eventual forger had to apply first the blood stains, then place eventually the cloth on the bas-relief. First of all, trying to make coincide the blood stains with the different parts of the body. But at that point, then the blood would have got cooked. So anyway, I give just here an example of that category I mentioned before, that the bunch of baloney. There are two authors from England, Clive Prince and Lee Picknett, that claim the Shroud is a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. They just leave out the fundamental detail. The Shroud is documented in history at least for a century before the Leonardo da Vinci was born. Okay, maybe for them it's not that important. But, that is Max Frey. He was not a member of the third, but he was invited to carry out research in 1978 using just normal sticky tape, the kind that you can buy at Walmart. He applied on different parts of the Shroud and removed the sticky tape placed on some small glass slabs, like the ones that you use for an optical microscope, and then he examined later. He was the head of the criminal police in Zurich. He was an expert on pollens. Okay. He found 48, 49 pollens of different species of plant, 30 of which are typical of specific of the Middle East. That one in particular, Zygophyllum dumosum, it grows in the whole world, only in that area. Western Jordan, southern Israel, and the Sinai Peninsula. This other one, the Gundelia turniforti, forms 27% of the pollens were found, and especially around the head. The Gundelia turniforti is like a thistle, but then when it grows up, becomes like a tumbleweed. So some people theorize that could have been used for to make the crown of thorns. I personally don't think so. I have seen also in video. Doesn't have that strength to probably to be molded or blown. Okay. Okay. Oh, here we get into the part that probably Father Richard would like. How the Shroud influenced the Christian art. So we know that the Shroud is documented in history to have appeared in the 1350s, but there is in 1204, 1203, 1204, there was the Fourth Crusade, when the Crusaders practically first went to Constantinople, and then after a while, since they were not receiving payment from the Byzantine Emperor, attacked the city, sacked the city. There is a memoir by one of the Crusaders by the name of Robert de Clary, who says, it's there now, I will not read it then, who says that he had seen the Sidouan, the Shroud of our Lord, to be lifted every Friday in the church of Our Lady of Blackerne in Constantinople, present-day Istanbul. So now the question is, was that Sidouan, the Shroud that Robert de Clary claims to have seen, the same that is nowadays the Shroud of Turin? I think I can prove that it was. Okay. When the Sturp examined the Shroud in 1978, when the Shroud was examined on raking light, that means with the Shroud was like that, with a light not from the top, but at an angle of about 40-45 degrees, they noticed there were folds all along the Shroud, almost at different intervals, regular intervals. And the linen has the character of having a kind of memory. If you fold it and you keep those folds for a long time, or you keep folding a certain way, it forms creases, so it memorizes those folds. So John Jackson, the head of the SERP, the gentleman we saw in the video earlier, studied those folds for years, and he came up, I think that was really an act of genius, with the theory that actually the Shroud was in a kind of machine or some kind of device that was created by the Byzantines. The Byzantines were quite famous for creating very theatrical mechanism to impress the dignitaries, foreign dignitaries, and ambassadors, blah, blah, blah. So that is how the machine would be. So the Shroud was folded inside this machine, and there would be possible to lift the Shroud from out of this box in a way that now I'll try to show the other video. I hope it works again. It shows how it's a reenactment of how that machine works, how possibly Robert de Clary, the Crusaders, what he possibly saw.
Were established to ensure the test would be as definitive as possible. Multiple sample areas. A simultaneous comprehensive examination led by Sturth that would also ensure the most suitable sample areas were chosen. All 7 major C14 labs to be given samples. The test would be blind to the labs. They would be given linen from the Shroud and control samples.
The atmosphere. It was even more than oil, according to one text.
This is what possible Robert de Clary saw. It's very impressive. So that is how that device that John Jackson rebuilt according to the falls, how that the Shroud was lifted every Friday in the Church of St. Maria Player. If I had been Robert de Clary, seeing something like that, probably I would have fainted or had a heart attack. Okay. Okay. Okay, and so in 1204, Robert de Clary, in his same memoir, in the same memoir, Robert de Clary, where he discovered he had seen the Shroud to be lifted every Friday evening, he claims that after the sack of Constantinople, all the relics, including the Shroud, disappeared, and no one knew, neither Greek, meaning the Byzantines, nor French knew what had happened. But what is interesting is that about in that same period, in the beginning of the 13th century, the 1200s, it starts to appear in Christian art a representation of Christ that is very peculiar. It's Christ, he's dead, but he's standing up and coming out what could look like a sepulchre, but could also look like a box. And if you compare to the Shroud, the arms are crossed the same way like on the Shroud. And there is a very peculiar treatment of the abdominal area that looks like that area on the Shroud where there is a water stain. Same thing for this other. Those images were called the Imago Pietatis, or the Men of Sorrows. Another one, this is in Rome. This is one that I absolutely love. This one. This is the Prey manuscript. The Prey manuscript is the first document of the Hungarian, the first document of the written document of the Hungarian language. It was discovered by Prey, the scholar that found it, and is preserved in Budapest in the National Library. It has been confidently dated to 1192, 1195. So we have seen the Shroud. It's almost sure that it was in Constantinople in 1204. With this document, we can already go back probably another 10 years to the 1190s. In the Prey manuscript, there is a page with two miniatures. In the upper part, there is the preparation of Christ for burial. And the lower part, there is the women going to the sepulchre on Sunday morning, and they find the sepulchre empty and an angel or sitting on something that looks like a shroud. Now look at this. Sorry. If you rotate the body of Christ over 90 degrees from horizontal to vertical, and you compare it with the shroud, you see that the body of Christ on the Prey manuscript is naked, like the shroud. The arms are crossed like on the shroud. There are 4 fingers on each hand, like on the shroud. You don't see any thumb. And there is a mark on the forehead of the Christ on the prayer manuscript, exactly like where there is the reveal of the blood on the shroud. But it is not enough. If you look at the women go to the sepulchre, first of all you see that there is something that looks like the zigzag pattern of the shroud there. But then if you look at that area, now I'll magnify that is circled there. We see again those famous 4 burn holes that we had seen earlier in that copy of 1516. So I can absolutely affirm there is no way in the world that artist had done that by coincidence. He had either seen the shroud or someone had instructed him what to do, because the person that instructed the artist had seen the shroud. Actually, I know that the historical reason, but I don't want to. You can ask me in the questions later. And now I'll show you how the shroud could have also influenced the coinage of Byzantine coins. These coins, by the way, are mine. I have them in my pockets. If you want to see them later, but just let me know. At the bottom there are now, I'm not going to leave the emperors that struck them, but look at that Christ face. You see that the eyebrows form like a T with the nose. You see there? Exactly like it looks like on the shroud. Sorry. The eyebrows horizontal and the long nose. The mustache has something hanging on below the mustache, like it looks like you see the mustache and something under the mustache, as though Christ were kind of trying to give a kiss. And then there is that edge of the garment, exactly where on the shroud there is a fold there. I don't know, it's not so visible, but same thing here for this other coin, same treatment of the eyebrows. Sorry, the eyebrows with the long nose, same treatment of the mustache and that hanging part. And this is the other details, but this is the first time that in Byzantine history a coin was struck with the face of Christ on it. It was done by Justinian II in 1692. And also there is this Pantocrator face that was found in the monastery of St. Catherine on the Sinai Peninsula. There has a lot of characteristics: big eyes, long nose, like on the shroud, the mustache. Here, that hanging part that is under the mustache is like a what do you call it? Goatee, sorry, a goatee. These are the 2 coins that are not. The face is not too much shroud-like, but are very peculiar for another characteristic that is fantastic. You see the left foot of Christ looks normal. The right foot looks like withered and turned to the right. See there? Left foot normal. Same thing for sorry, not so forward. Same thing for this other coin. Basil the Massimo was the first emperor to represent Christ on a throne on Byzantine coins. Same thing. Left foot normal, right foot. The theory is that, and I found it very plausible. If you look at that is the back of the dorsal image. So that is, as I explained, because of the mirror image, that is actually that image was left by the left leg, but actually it looks like the right leg. And you see there, the foot looks shorter than the left one. So very likely the Byzantines saw the shroud, but did not understand the issue of the mirror image, and so that what gave rise to the legend of the crippled Christ. This is an area where there is blood on the shroud. There's a fragment of blood. That is Pierluigi Baima Bollone, the Italian forensic pathologist who identified the blood type on the shroud. The blood on the shroud is of type AB. It's the rarest of the blood types. It's about 5% of the population has blood type AB. This is a cloth that is preserved in Oviedo, Spain. It's called the Sudarium of Oviedo. It's made of linen. There are blood stains, and there are stains made by pleural edema that came out from the lungs, especially because of the scourging, the beating. After I personally knew Dr. Carlo Goldoni, a hematologist from Rome, who was given a few threads from the Sudarium of Oviedo. He identified the human blood, but of type AB. Now, so what's the big deal? Practically, the Sudarium of Oviedo is what in the chapter 20 of John, when it says that Peter and John ran to the sepulchre and saw the burial cloth lying there. The burial cloth lying there practically was the shroud. But then the cloth had been put on his face, folded in a corner. That is the cloth that was folded in a corner. Is another picture, but so practically the Sudarium was when the man of the shroud was on the cross. Nietzsche was pinned to the bed, placed on the face. At a certain point, probably because of the obstacle, maybe the right hand was folded like there. So this is why there are some things that look like they have been overlapped. But then when the man of the shroud was taken down, that point was placed all around the head and probably fixed with a knot. That is the itinerary of the Shroud was seen by a pilgrim in 570 and was in Jerusalem until 614, when under an invading army, Persian army, was taken to Alexandria. The Persian army went to siege also Alexandria, was taken all along North Africa, and then into Spain, the 7th century until Oviedo. So practically, it is absolutely documented since the 7th century. But the interesting thing is that you see there the blood stain from the crowning of thorns. Okay, that is a blood stain from the back of the head of the man of the shroud, the image on the shroud. There is that blood stain. It looks like a crab. That is a blood stain from the Sudarium of Oviedo. It's practically the same blood stain. Actually, if they overlap, they match perfectly. So, not only the blood stain is human on both cloths, not only is the same blood type AB, those two cloths were placed on the same head, and they could have been together only until 614, but then they must have taken a different itinerary. But if they were on the same face, this can help us to bring back the age of the shroud at least until the 7th century. This is a Eucharistic miracle I'm sorry to deviate the moment, but just a Eucharistic miracle from Lanciano in Italy. There was a Basilian priest in the 7th century, in the 600, that was doubtful about the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. At the moment of consecration, the wine turned into blood, and the big host turned into flesh. I saw that. I went there to see it. So that is a magnification, the coagulated blood and the mummified flesh. In the 1970s, Professor Linoli, that was the head of the labs of the hospital of the town of Arezzo in Tuscany, examined the samples and concluded that the blood is human blood of type AB. And the mummified flesh is a myocardial tissue, is a transversal section of the human heart. Someone could say, 7th century, too old, but okay. This is a Eucharistic miracle that occurred in Tixtla, Mexico in 2006, so quite more recently, and was approved by the bishop in 2013. You see, during the distribution of the Eucharist, a host showed some kind of reddish material, was examined. It was human blood of type AB. Okay, now these are the itineraries about skipping. Sorry. Okay, now we get into the forensic part, the medical part. So how the shroud, the tortures that the men of the shroud underwent practically correspond to the description of Passion, Death, and Resurrection of Christ in the Gospels. Not only in the Gospels, actually also in the prophecies about the Messiah from the Old Testament. I must admit one thing, and I have, looking at the shroud, I would say we have no clues of the suffering that man, either you think it was Jesus Christ or not, underwent. It's something of absolutely cannot be described. And the other thing that also makes me, not me, I'm copying, I'm reporting, that is a comment by Donald Lynn, that was a member of the STURP, that said that looking for someone that had been tortured so brutally, to have such a serene and peaceful face, it's something that is not exactly human. It's kind of superhuman. Anyway, there are 8 characteristics that we can find on the shroud that correspond to the Passion, Death, and Resurrection of Christ in the Gospels. The man of the shroud was scourged, and according to a Roman scourging, not according to Jewish scourging. The man of the shroud was crowned with some object called several punctured wounds. The man of the shroud carried a heavy object on the shoulders. The man of the shroud was pierced at the wrist, at least one wrist, so they are overlapped, and at the feet with some sharp object, probably nails. The man of the shroud was pierced at the chest with an object, probably was a lance. The man of the shroud was not washed after having been taken down from the cross. It was buried kind of in a haste, but the body was not washed. The man of the shroud was wrapped in a shroud. The man of the shroud did not stay in the shroud less than 10 hours and no more than 48 hours. I'll try to explain in more details. Let's start with the first one. Well, this is not exactly something that can be identifiable on the shroud, but my friend Emanuela Marinelli, the Italian shroud scholar who wrote 18 books and that I consider my mentor, told me that once she went to the Holy Land with the priest, and when they went to the Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane, where Christ had the agony, the priest gave this comment, this meditation, that practically Gethsemane means olive press, oil press. So there must have been there, in that area, a press where they pressed olives. An olive press squeezes oil out of the olives. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Christ felt the weight of mankind's sins over his shoulders, so heavy that squeezed blood out of his forehead. Hematohidrosis is a phenomenon that was described already by Aristotle. Has been seen, it's a condition that is usually noticed under extremely severe stress. Has been seen, for example, in people led to capital execution. But anyway, this is not particularly evident in the shroud. Then the man of the shroud was scourged. The scourge was definitely a Roman scourging. The Jews would not have used more, performed or used more than 39-40 lashes. On the manual, the shall have been counted in excess of 100 lashes. Actually, Monsignor Ricci counted 120, 121. With a Roman flagrum, and it is evident, I'll show you the next slide, that there were two scourges, one on one side, one on the other side, because practically the direction of the lashes are kind of crisscross. They were very efficient in their one got and then the other one. And so when one recharged, the other one was silent. That is a reconstruction of Roman flagrum. Had a wooden handle and then usually some leather straps, at the end of which there were either metal beads, probably made of lead, but lead is very malleable metal, or sometimes made of bones. I must say that the scourging in the Passion of Christ, the Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson is a little bit too much. The amount of blood is really way excessive, and there is a certain point. I remember when the flagrum hits the table of the Roman officer and then rips off a piece of wood. Wow. But anyway, although it was not able to, the leather strap tongue would cause contusions, and the metal beads would often, if the stroke was hard, would embed into the flesh and then rip the flesh apart. So that is, as you can see, you see those wounds go in that direction, from right bottom to top left. Those are the wounds that go in the other direction, from bottom left to top right. So there were two people scourging from both sides. That is the counting that was made by Monsignor Ricci, that he counted in excess of 100 lashes. And it is seen in the negative. You can see there, you can see there on my negative. It is brutal. So when I don't remember now what prophet said, on my shoulder have walked the flowers. Well, it was not too far from the reality. The body was totally devastated. We always see crucifix so clean, so neat. Not so corresponding to reality. Okay, well. Then the man of Shroud was crowned with some kind of item that caused puncture wounds. That is the back that I showed earlier, the back of the head of the man of Shroud. That is the shroud we have seen earlier. We don't know exactly which one is the plan, but definitely some thorny. That is a reconstruction of possibly how the crown of thorns was. We always are accustomed to the circlet of thorns, as John Jackson mentioned when we had the chance to talk with him in October. Romans had not the work gloves that you can buy at Home Depot. So if they found some thorny bush, they wouldn't waste too much time to try to make something nice and circular and all that. They took the whole thing and placed onto the head. So that is a reconstruction that is at the Shroud Museum in Turin. And then they pressed it with the reed. So very likely, unlike what we are accustomed to see, this is how the men of Shroud their life. By the way, those are two blood, that is human blood, that is a blood that came out from a vein. You see how it comes out slowly. That is blood that came out from an artery under pressure. You see, it kind of ejected out. And very likely it was out of the temporal artery. If you put your fingers here on the side of your head, you feel an artery is beating. That is a temporal artery. So that is blood. So another consideration, if the Shroud was from 1260 to 1390, the blood circulation was discovered by Andrea Cesalpino at the end of the 1500s. It was described by William Harvey, an English doctor, in the 1620s in writing. Someone already in the 1260s, 1390s had already discovered the blood circulation. It would be strange. And then the metal shroud carries something heavy on the shoulders. There are two areas of abrasions. See there and there. Consider one thing to give you an idea. Any of you had a sunburn, a bad sunburn? I had. But when you get a bad sunburn, someone can just blow on your shoulders and you jump or scream. Imagine some kind of beating like that one, and then they put on your shoulders a piece of wood that I'm sure was not neither sanded nor polished. And that had to be carried for a few hundred yards. That is a crucifix that was made by Monsignor Ricci, the teacher of my friend Emanuele Marinelli, so would be my grandfather in the school, in the lineage of teaching the Shroud. You see the two areas of abrasion. So those are the marks of the scourging, and they're the two areas of abrasion. Very likely, we are usually accustomed to see Christ, that's what I need to mention, carrying the whole cross. The man of the Shroud very likely carried just the patibulum, that was the crossbar. Once he reached the area of crucifixion, was then nailed to the crossbar, then lifted up, and then the feet would be nailed. So that is the wound on the left wrist. Those seems like okay. Regarding the feet, I had those two slides because initially I was saying that very likely they use one nail to nail both feet, but then someone convinced me that probably they use two nails. But then now I think now it's not possible. It must have been one nail because the two nails there. That nail there would have broken some bones, and the prophecies about the Messiah that no bones would be broken. John Jackson told when I spoke to him, he mentioned that he was an officer at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. He once asked a cadet if he could volunteer to be crucified. Of course, not with nails. And the funny thing is that they had prepared everything. There were two dogs that come from to stage this fake crucifixion. Of course, with ropes. I don't know how he can it, but and then this cadet goes to the Jackson and says, "You know what? I cannot come." I said, "Why?" I've been punished. I have to do some work. I cannot do. And John Jackson got this idea. Go to the officer that punished him. Tell him. Well, instead of the punishment, can I undergo crucifixion? And he did it. And the officer said, okay. Anyway, so he said that when he hanged this cadet, if the feet were blocked they were too much blocked without too much mobility, the cadet had not too much capacity of movement, and when he had the hand extended, he tried to apply some liquid similar to blood at the wrist, and the blood would fall by gravity to the ground. It would not run along the arms, like you see on the arms of the man of Shroud. But then, if they allowed the cadet a little bit more mobility of the feet, the cadet started going to one side and to the other side, started bending. At that point, when he applied the fake blood, it would start running along the arms. So this is also one thing that makes me think that probably only one nail was used to nail both feet. So to have more, the man of the child had some kind of mobility this is the crucifix by Monsignor Ricci that we saw earlier. That is how it fits at the moment of death, in rigor mortis. One thing is that I know some people say that Christ died of asphyxiation, and I think probably also Father Richard thinks that. Unluckily, if Christ had died of asphyxiation, he would have progressively lost lucidity, he would have passed out, and then death would have intervened. So Christ was lucid until the last moment, so definitely he didn't have of asphyxiation. Anyway, usually asphyxiation intervenes, especially if the people are hanged without any support under the feet, but since the feet were nailed, there was some possibility to try to lift the body and try to breathe a little bit better. That is the wound at the chest. That is the real hole of the lens, and that is the blood that came out. One theory that I always mentioned in the past, but now I'm prone to kind of revise a little bit, that Christ died of hemopericardium. Hemopericardium is a massive heart attack that practically in which the wound it causes a crack that goes through the whole wall of the heart. The blood starts gushing out and starts filling the pericardium. It is a membrane that wraps the heart around it and fills the pericardium, and filling the pericardium prevents the heart from being able to expand during the diastolic expansion. That causes a so-called tamponade and cardiac arrest. People that died of hemopericardium, usually the pain is excruciating. By the way, let's not mention, I forgot to say, the word excruciating comes from the Latin ex cruce, from the cross. Anyway, the pain is excruciating, and people usually die releasing a loud scream. Both Matthew and Mark mention that Christ died releasing a loud scream. The only thing that, I don't know, the weak link of this theory is that in order to have a hemopericardium, usually you must have had a former heart attack. I spoke with Piero Pescetelli, this friend of mine that is a cardiologist. He thinks that, no, it's not possible that Christ could have had a heart attack between the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane and the crucifixion. It's too much a short time. So that is the weak link of, I'm revising this possibility, but so far it's the one that convinces me the most. So practically, inside the pericardium, the blood started coagulating, separating in red cells and the serum. So when the centurion pierced the chest, what John says we saw blood and water come out actually was the particularly part of the blood and the serum. So that is the example of the hemopericardium, a massive heart attack. Blood starts to coagulate when the lens pierces the chest. Then the man of the shroud was wrapped in the shroud. That is a statue by Mattei, the entire scapular. That is, according to the date of the shroud, at least the whole life-size body of the man of the shroud. It's not like mine that is 1/3. The life-size body. This is another statue that shows how the man of the shroud was when wrapped in the shroud. He died, and then rigor mortis intervened much more quickly because of the brutal traumas that he underwent. So he practically, you can see that the head was not lying on the bench of the tomb, was raised, because when he died, he reclined his head over his chest. and the legs were fixed in the rigor mortis in the position that they were on the cross, in order to have the feet hang against flash against the cross. The legs were bent. So that is from the side, from the front, from the back. Anyway, so this is in Italian, but the body was not washed. The human blood is human blood type AB. Blah, blah, blah. There is blood from veins and from arteries. There is an elevated quantity of bilirubin. Bilirubin is a substance that gets formed in the blood under a condition of trauma. This is why the blood on the shroud is so reddish. Some people it looks too young, too fresh blood. After 2,000 years, it would be much darker. It's blood that is coagulated on the skin of a man with serum under ultraviolet fluorescent light. You can see that some blood stains had a halo of serum around it that fluoresces. So that means that blood coagulated left around this halo of serum that is only visible under fluorescent light. The blood was transferred to the shroud from the condition of the blood clot, how the blood clot transferred. The man remained in the shroud not more than about 36-40 hours. There is no sign of decomposition. If it remained more than 36-40 hours, the composition would have started to intervene. Ammonia gas would have started to be produced and released through the mouth and through the nose. You would see a halo around the nose and the mouth. There is no halo on the shroud. The other thing is that the body was not taken out of the shroud. If the body had been taken out of the shroud, the edges of the bloodstain would be smeared. The bloodstains are very clearly defined. The body practically disappeared from inside the shroud without affecting the. Now I'll explain how. And under the bloodstains there is no body image. So that it was placed in the tomb like that. This is an effect chosen by the Love of My Life Carol to give this. Practically, theologically, Christ was the Lamb of God. From the book of Exodus, he said when God told Moses to prepare the lamb for the Passover, the lamb had to be eaten by one family if the family could not afford it, two families, but no leftover had to be left. The whole leftover had to be burned before the next day. Christ is the Lamb of God, and Christ is the light of the world. Practically, being the Lamb of God, nothing had to be left for the Passover day. So when at the moment of resurrection, practically his body, according to the theory of John Jackson, the one that I like the most, there was the so-called fall-through hypothesis. That means the body became practically materially transparent, dissolved into an explosion of energy, and the shroud practically deflated, passing through the body, and while it was passing through this body that had the irradiating energy, got imprinted with the body image. By the way, one thing that one thread with the body image has been treated with 21 or 25 different solvents without being able to remove the body image. Sorry, I like this. This is another concession to my wife that she thinks that effect could give the idea that Peter and John was running to the tomb. To me, it's the idea that they were either dancing the tarantella or they were getting very dizzy, ready to pass out. But then, so they went to the tomb. And when they say they saw the burial cloth lying there, that there was a shroud, the cloth lying on the side, it was the Sudan of Oviedo. And then they saw and believed. I've no doubt that what they saw was the the image on the shroud. That's what made them believe. Anyway, super quickly, those 8 characteristics that we mentioned earlier that are present in the present on the shroud and are present also in the description of the Gospels. If you flip a coin, you have 1 chance out of 2 to get head. If you flip 2 coins, you have 1 chance out of 4 to get both coins with head. You must multiply the chance of one by the chance of the other one. If you flip 3 coins, you have 1 chance out of 8 to get 3 heads with 3 heads, and so on. When you have an event that's formed by several different events, you must multiply the probability of each event with the probability of all the other ones. And now, I'm not getting this, you're tired, we're going to go to bed, but if you multiply the probabilities of all those events together, we get a chance of 1 out 1,000, million, billion, 4 trillion. Wow. I don't think, I've not yet asked the chance to ask a statistician how many human beings are considered to have lived on the face of Earth since Adam and Eve, but I think to say maybe 50 billion would be an exaggeration. Here we are talking of 4,000 billion. So 1 chance out of 4,000 billion, which brings to the conclusion practically there was only 1 man of the shroud that you know well. Anyway, at this point, I would say that I rest my case. I think that I provided, I assume, sufficient information to answer yes to both questions. The shroud authentic, was the man of shroud Jesus of Nazareth? But I know that I don't know who said that for someone who has faith, no evidence is necessary. For someone who has faith, no evidence is sufficient. Mm-hmm. So there is always the doubting Thomas, and if we want to apply it to the field of shroud, we have the doubting Thomas doubting about the shroud anyway. Anyway, if someone here still believes that shroud is a forgery, I would like to say, paraphrasing a statement that was in a video, that the Shroud of Turin is either the most inspiring, the most instructive, the most eloquent, the most precious, and the most mysterious relic of Jesus of Nazareth and of all Christianity, or is the most unbelievable, the most ingenious, the most unrepeatable, and the most fantastic product of the human mind on record. There is no middle ground. Regarding the carbon-14 test, this shows that practically, in spite of all that huge amount of information that there was, the carbon-14 laboratories just wanted the publicity from themselves. They excluded practically, there was 1% of element against the shroud, 99% of element in favor. They just focused on that 1% of elements against the shroud. But I have the pleasure to know a shroud researcher that very humbly has worked for all these years tirelessly to try to change that verdict of the carbon-14 test, and he has kind of convinced the lab to change the date. You see, 1st century AD. Of course, it's a fake, it's a Photoshop. You cannot say, what if they don't understand it? So that was a picture taken by my father-in-law Albert Primavera. This is why I thanked him at the beginning, and that my friend Giorgio Bracaglio of the Holy Shroud Guild made the Photoshop. And they say, what if they think you are serious? I'm not serious. I'm not pretending I was in 1988 there. Come on. Anyway, being serious, to wrap up, that you believe it or not, one day we shall show up in front of that face. And I wish myself and I wish all of you that we shall be able to hear from that mouth being said, well done, good and faithful servant, come to share the joy of the kingdom. Thank you very much for your attention. Maybe I will reply, that is my email address and my phone number. I'm trying, I have an idea, I don't guarantee when or even if it will be possible, but I would like to maybe in the future to create a Shroud Center in this area to carry out the research and maybe to give courses to deepen the study in the knowledge of the Shroud. Ooh, sorry. Ooh. That is www.shroud.com. That is the website of Barry Schwartz. It's definitely the best website on the Shroud. There's plenty of information, whatever you want to know. And that is a documentary that is on YouTube, A Grave Injustice. It's 25-26 minutes. That is the one from which I took that footage of the Christ being lifted from the box. It's very instructive about the carbon 14 test. One last thing. If you want, you can either contact me. If you leave me your contact, and I'll contact you if you're interested in courses or creating cooperating. There is a gentleman by the name of Richard Orario. He's 80. He has the third largest collection of Shroud items in the world. He's trying to donate that collection. He has not yet found anyone. He doesn't want to be paid. He was going to donate it. But I contacted the St. Charles Seminary. They said no, they're going to relocate. They cannot do it. I contacted Margaret Reed House. After 3 months, they have not yet been able to give me an answer. If you have some hints or have an idea of what, or I don't know, I'm even thinking that maybe we could raise some funds and create a center. It would be a center, museum, and teaching center. So let me know whatever. And one last thing, that is Emanuele Marinelli, my very good friend who has written 18 books on the Shroud. That is my friend and of more than 20 years and my mentor. Thank you very much.